This podcast is brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon. Welcome to this latest Deepbridge Discovery Podcast. My name is Andrew Aldridge. The purpose of these podcasts is to bring to life the people and the companies behind what we do here at Deepbridge. To that end, I'm delighted today to be joined by Clemens Wangerin, who's CEO of vTime, a company within the Deepbridge Technology Growth EIS, as well as Simon Thurwell-Jones, who's Fund Manager and Head of Technology Growth here at Deepbridge. Simon, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. So obviously we're talking about vTime, speaking specifically about kind of where they're up to, what they're doing. So kind of really just starting off, why are you so excited at the moment about what vTime are working on?
Okay, well, first of all, nice to see you again this morning, Andrew. So my personal belief is that vTime really is at the cutting edge of metaverse enablement technology, which is the phraseology that we use. What do I mean by that? Or what do I mean by metaverse enablement technology? Well, firstly, it's about the ability to assist individuals, me, you, gamers, people who want to get involved in immersive realities, to easily create a full-bodied virtual digital twin of themselves, which is often referred to as an avatar.
Yep.
And that avatar will have bespoke voice synthesis, so it'll sound like you, although there are technologies that they've developed where, you could be talking in French or Japanese or whatever. So bespoke voice synthesis, and it will be incredibly realistic in terms of its face and body tracking. We've looked far and wide at the competition, including the likes of Meta. And we really do believe that vTime is up there, if not ahead of a lot of the players in this space. There are a lot of people who've developed avatars, but the level of realism of the vTime avatars and the way they move and everything else is much more realistic and lifelike than a lot of other offerings on the market. So that's the first thing. So ability to create an individual digital twin of yourself. And then the other thing is your ability to create virtual worlds that are bespoke to you. So without really the need for any coding. So vTime uses, it's becoming, a well-known term now, I think, within the tech world, this concept of generative AI. ChatGPT has been released. There's been a lot of talk about that. vTime have actually been using the equivalent for quite a long time. So they're able to, you can simply scan a real world environment with your mobile phone, and then vTime's technology will create a virtual digital equivalent for you. And it can do that very, very quickly. Or you can simply describe in text, and ultimately it will be by way of voice as well, the type of environment that you want to create, and vTime's technology will do that for you. And that's extremely powerful in the context of creating a digital twin of yourself and digital environments which are very bespoke to you and your friends and colleagues, etc. And if you look at the other thing, if you look at what the industry commentators like McKinsey and Grandview Research are saying about the likely market opportunity for the metaverse, it's enormous. Ultimately it runs into billions or even trillions of dollars. So it's a very, very large market opportunity.
Well, it's no surprise that Facebook became Meta. That's obviously just shows the direction of travel of the industry.
Absolutely. So that's what excites me, Andrew.
So kind of that's the excitement. That's kind of why you like vTime and why we're investing. But historically, kind of what progress have vTime made, and you've been with Deepbridge for a year now, Simon. I know you knew vTime previously when in different guises, etc. But what progress have you seen the organisation make, and what's been pleasing about that?
Well, I think, the honest answer is, Andrew, every time I go to their studio in Liverpool, I can't help but be impressed by the pace of the progress. I've talked about what metaverse enablement tools are, and every time I go there, they're rendering environments faster, so they're creating those digital worlds faster. As I say, the avatars, initially they were just speaking to me. Now you can record my voice or your voice, and then we speak to you in French or other languages. The other thing which I've been very impressed with recently is the progress they've made with virtual intelligent avatars. So I guess everybody will have dealt with, or at least be aware of, chatbots that pop up on websites which are there to help you with customer service problems, inquiries, etc. Well, vTime have now developed, a virtual assistant that will intelligently work its way through question sets and help you much more visually than you'd get with a chatbot. So every time I go, lots and lots of progress being made.
And I think from my perspective, when historically through having known vTime over the last few years, is they're always talking about technologies that don't exist yet. So they're very much the pioneers, innovative in their space, and it's from my perspective, it's always fascinating to see those conversations become reality, which is changing the way that these industries work. Which that's my take on it anyway. But so going forward, obviously our investors, etc., are wanting to know what the future looks like for the company. What kind of inflection point would there likely be an exit, or who might actually be interested in acquiring such a company like vTime, etc. So have you kind of got any thoughts or take on that?
So we are constantly evaluating the right time to exit all of the companies in our portfolio, and vTime's no exception in that regard. We think that the potential scale of the metaverse is so vast that there's a real possibility of a very significant exit from vTime for our investors. I mean, just to give you one example, there's an AI avatar company called Alter, which is based in the Czech Republic, that was reportedly sold to Google for $100 million late last year. So the scale of these opportunities, given the scale of the metaverse, is quite considerable. Precisely when we'll exit, I really think that depends on how far we want to take the technology before we believe that it's at a point where, in the hands of a much larger organization with the scale to reach consumers, millions and millions, if not billions of consumers, that's where we need to move the company onto, to a buyer with that sort of reach in order to realize the full potential. So precisely when we do that is constantly being evaluated.
And I think that's the same for kind of a majority, if not all, of our investee companies, isn't it? It's a constant evaluation of the market, what's going on, where opportunities might lie, etc. And that's what you and the team do so well, Simon. So yeah, absolutely. Just on kind of exits, but kind of bring that back to today, if you like, the market context. I mean, people won't have been able to go anywhere without noticing what's happened with big tech valuations over the last 12 months, etc. What does that look like kind of at down the food chain, if you like, to organizations like vTime and wider tech companies?
Well, I think there is no question that at the macro level, tech is currently having a really tough time of it. We've talked about Meta earlier in the call. There have been lots of layoffs by really big companies like Meta, like Amazon in the first quarter of this year. People won't have failed to notice the issues with tech banks like Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, which has caused people to catch breath in the tech world. And of course, there are wider economic issues such as the sort of rampant inflation that we're experiencing, which lead to higher interest rates. And the way that analysts value quoted companies is typically on forward-looking forecasts, and they use discounted cash flows, and interest rates form a very integral part of the calculation of future values of those flow streams. So higher interest rates do significantly impact on quoted company valuations. And, that does cascade down into the private investment market. And we do see companies which were, at the time that previous investments were made or previous rounds were raising at what would have been considered on-market valuations at that time. But with the decline in quoted company valuations and what commentators and industry participants like ourselves are seeing in terms of multiples that are being paid both for investment rounds and from purchasers, is that there has definitely been a softening of private tech company valuations, probably from the second half of last year, and that's continuing at the moment. And we'll have to see when that comes back.
Yeah, and that's reflected across the industry, and it's the fact of the world at the moment. So So Simon, thank you very much for joining us. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too, Andrew. Take care. Cheers now. Bye bye.
So Clemens, great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Good to see you too, Andrew.
Excellent. We've done this podcast before. We've done a general intro to vTime. You've talked about your background, etc. So, we've gone through all that background of the team, etc. So, can you just kind of give us a bit of an overview for anybody who's new to vTime, but also kind of a bit of an update for existing investors and people who know vTime, just about kind of the history of vTime, the key milestones that you've achieved so far?
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously, vTime was originally founded back in 2013, so I won't go quite back that far in terms of the potted history. But as we covered last time, the company is made up of lots of industry veterans as far as the games industry is concerned, and people with decades of experience, and that very much holds true to this day. There's over 40 people in the team, and I think collectively we have about over 550 years of experience of developing software, entertainment software. So I think we're in good hands. Of course, in the time that we've been in existence, we've built very good relationships with all the major industry players, Meta, Qualcomm, and Apple. And we'll come back to Apple probably as part of this podcast, because there's some interesting sort of impending announcements that are sort of in the pipeline. Of course, I think even when we last spoke, we were already quite active in the sort of outside of the sort of traditional games part. We were focusing a lot on, as far as non-gaming is concerned, a lot on sports, a lot on football and fan engagement, particularly with young people. And we've done some interesting work there in China with the Beijing FC, the owners of the Beijing Workers Stadium. So maybe we'll come back to that. But that is a really exciting project where they're investing a lot of money into effectively rebuilding, or having completed that project now, rebuilding the sort of main stadium within Beijing city center that is home to Beijing FC. And as part of that sort of rebuild, which was several billion pounds, the owners, Sociable, are investing heavily into infrastructure and into metaverse-like sort of capabilities that will exist within the sort of physical environment of the stadium. And we're one of the key partners that are developing software at the sort of experience level that people will end up interfacing with there. So that's really quite exciting.
So you've mentioned kind of very briefly there, kind of a bit of gaming, the sports, etc. Kind of who have you been your target markets, or who you've been kind of looking to work with historically?
Yeah, I mean, historically we've always been focused on building really close relationships with the format holders, with the sort of key players within the ecosystem. We've just agreed to join Qualcomm's Snapdragon Spaces program, for example. So Qualcomm is one of the, if not the leading semiconductor company in the market, originally from the US. And Snapdragon Spaces is effectively a Pathfinder program where they work with a very small select number of developers on bringing experiences that are really leading edge and innovative to new hardware devices. And so we've joined that program. We're going to be developing one of our projects via a virtual intelligent avatar for a pair of Lenovo AR glasses. And being part of this Pathfinder program also means we're looking forward to more introductions to OEM in the future, and being able to build on that relationship with Qualcomm.
Awesome, brilliant. So obviously Qualcomm kind of, I think a lot of people, when they first got introduced to vTime a few years ago, vTime XR was kind of the software, the platform, etc., and that was being rolled out on VR headsets, etc. Who we've been working with on those kind of early innovations, and how has that evolved over recent years?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think one thing that we were able to benefit from, if you like, is that being as sort of focused on VR as we were when we first started the business, meant that we were always in a great position to kind of see how that market was evolving. And we saw once Meta decided to introduce the Quest headset, we saw a clear opportunity there for gaming, because it became a really easy to understand proposition. The VR headsets were fully integrated. You didn't need anything else other than this device that you were able to buy. And so we've been working quite closely with Team 17, for example, on a VR game specific project where they were looking for somebody who's got a sort of high level of experience of VR to help them bring one of their licensed IPs to the gaming market. Okay. And so we were in a really great position to take advantage of that, and it allowed us to get a good 7-figure deal on the back of it. And it's actually given us a sort of impetus to create a small division within the company to look after the game side of things on a bit more ongoing basis, because we do see that as a fairly good and promising contributor to our bottom line going forward.
And that wasn't necessarily always the case. It's kind of almost been I guess, is it fair to say that's been kind of a byproduct of your success and what you're doing, and obviously, I guess, a relatively natural fit with the gaming background of the team?
Correct. Yeah, I think it's been nice in a way to sort of go back and do a game, we've always stuck to. We were always using gaming technologies. We were just using them in sort of gaming adjacent areas, and we're continuing to do that. I'm sure as part of this conversation, we'll get on to some of the sort of exciting work that we're doing in AI, machine learning, and generative AI. But as far as actually being sort of more near-term revenue-generating opportunities, games and VR games in particular have been really, really promising for us, and we decided to jump on that because long term it ultimately all helps the business be strong and stand on its own 2 feet and allows it to operate to the best of its ability.
Awesome. Before we kind of go on to the kind of the exciting, sexy stuff, the AI generative content, etc. and things, you mentioned Beijing FC before. I think it would be remiss for us not to talk about that. I mean, you've historically worked with Manchester City, you've worked with Beijing FC, you've currently got work ongoing with Everton Football Club. That sporting world is an opportunity, kind of, but I know they've all been very different projects. Can you just kind of outline a bit about those projects and what they look like?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, what we're certainly seeing in the world of sport is that there is an inherent desire to really understand how these new technologies and terms like the metaverse and avatars and all the bits that we really sort of got our deep knowledge in and experience in, how are they relevant to their core businesses, which of course is fans and fans ultimately consuming the sport and football in this case. And so I think what we found is that there's some common ground between all of these sort of entries in terms of understanding how can they best connect with fans that aren't physically in the same city that the club is based in. Especially in the Premier League, you're looking at clubs with global fan bases, and a large proportion of those fans will never physically set foot in the stadium. So of course there's on the one hand you want people to be able to sort of experience whole matches virtually and sort of buy a virtual ticket and sit in a virtual seat. And, that's an area that we never really sort of focused on. We focused much more on the engagement, particularly with younger fans, young people that come to football and sport in general in a very, very different way compared to how, for example, my generation would have done, where, your parent maybe took you to the match and then you were indoctrinated and, you were a fan for life kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Young people these days are a bit more They probably don't watch a full match for 90 minutes. They probably have 3 or 4 different teams. Can you imagine that they really like?
I mean, that's just criminal for a start, but hey ho, we never.
Yeah. So I think we're just really comfortable in that space because the technology is so relevant to young people, and we found sport and tourism really. I mean, they're quite different, but we found those outside of gaming, the sort of really areas of the market where there is a lot of traction, and then it's the training side of things where we've also made the most progress since we last time spoke, and maybe we'll get onto that. And
so that's really interesting. You kind of look at the market as a whole, kind of trends, etc. I guess certainly since 2013, the world has changed dramatically. Certainly the world that you work in has changed dramatically. What trends are you seeing in the market, and how do you kind of make sure that vTime has got that kind of market competitiveness?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a pretty, I think you could say, volatile, start, certainly since the start of the year, maybe even, going into and the back end of last year. And I think, we've certainly seen that volatility, extend to things like tech valuations, generally speaking.
That's fair.
And of course, vTime is no different in that regard. But we are seeing shoots of recovery in the industry. I think it's fair to say. We certainly think longer term valuations are going to stabilize, and we're pretty confident about that. But I think the key thing, as always, is you got to have product that's in demand. You got to have services that people are in the market for. I'm very confident we're ticking both those boxes, and we've got a really good mixture between innovation, R&D, that we're where we've got a really long-term view, and then we've got the near-term sort of elements that are more revenue focused, and allow us to sort of make the most out of these near-term opportunities. So from our point of view, we think we've got the balance just about right.
Yep.
But it has definitely been a challenging period, and seeing what's going on in the US and stuff is we of course we take note of that, and we make sure that the business is in the best shape possible.
Absolutely, and lots of exciting things going on. So kind of nicely brings me on to can you tell our listeners or our viewers just a bit about kind of some of the key projects you're working on at the moment, kind of some of the exciting AI related content that you're building, etc., and just expand a bit more on that.
Yeah, so we decided a good while ago, probably just before the start of the pandemic, we saw that sort of enabling technologies like AI and machine learning were going to play. Well, at that point, we thought, okay, these things are definitely going to play a role. At that point, you had DeepMind and Google, and everything was still more sort of on the level of this is AI that can win at playing Go, right?
Yep.
Sort of. But of course, what we witnessed, and we thought even at that point, that's great. We should build a team internally. We should invest into that area. It will have some relevance, and we very early on developed some product features that make use of those kind of technologies. The creation of avatars through a single photograph, for example. So we pushed down on that quite heavily. What we couldn't have foreseen is just over the last sort of 2 years or year and a bit, that sort of explosion of activity, and of course, also explosion of progress. So I think the important thing to say from vTime's point of view is we're AI powered. We're making use of these fantastic technologies to enable features in our products that simply wouldn't be possible otherwise. And where we benefit from having invested into this area so early on is that we have a very good handle on how we can leverage those technologies. And so I touched on our virtual intelligent avatar there before. That is a fully realized 3D avatar that you can interact with either through a pair of glasses or on a website or in a VR headset. And that is effectively animated and driven by AI, things like ChatGPT 3 or 4 as it is now, and you can have a free-form natural conversation with this digital character. And of course, that could be relevant in in training, as I mentioned. It could be relevant in tourism, but it could be relevant, of course, in sports. So that could be the club representative that knows everything there is to know about Manchester United, right? Or Liverpool FC. It's like, that sort of oracle.
You're giving away my dark secret there, Clem. That's the job I want.
You let the cat out of the bag. But yeah, so I think what we're saying here is that these things combined with generative AI are going to dramatically improve the user experience and lower the barrier to, I guess, content creation or lower the barrier for people to really get immersed in content and experiences that are relevant to them. And so, for us, we've just been focusing on really sort of being able to show how some of these features really work in practice, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that with many of the listeners today at some point in the future.
And with the kind of the AI world, I guess, as part of you doing that, I guess, is it checks and balances you have to build in to make sure that you've still got control over what's going on and it fits into to what you and your clients need and expect?
Correct. Yeah. So I think one thing that's you sort of a key takeaway you come across very early on in this space is you need these sort of guardrails around these systems. When you build your models, it's easy just to sort of give it complete freedom, but of course then you sort of you never know what you might get as a result. And then the quality of the data that you use to train these models is also has a huge influence on the quality of the output. So in both those cases, I think we're quite conscious of that, and that's when our main application of them is really in partnership with some key with some key partners where we can really make sure that the result is as they would like it.
And then the other thing you touched on there was about the avatars themselves, and I guess that's one of your key areas of one of your USPs really is your quality of avatars, etc. Can you just tell our audience a little bit more about kind of how you're kind of leading that market and what that looks like and why that's important?
Yeah, sure. So for us, the avatars, obviously to begin with, it was important to get an avatar that is a sort of looks as close to a sort of representation of yourself as you would like. And we've always taken an approach where we display avatars in a sort of stylized way. We never went for photorealism, and the reason for that is that photorealism is really, well, in this day and age, still impossible to achieve on a consumer device, on something that everybody has access to. You could probably do it on a really high-end device, but even then it probably wouldn't be real time. So we went for something more stylized, Pixar type sort of level of quality. But we decided to really build systems that allow users to imbue these characters with a huge amount of their personality. Mm-hmm. So that's everything from your facial expressions. So when you actually record a message, for example, with the avatar, all of your facial expressions are with the right sensors recorded and then sort of transposed onto the face of the avatar. Okay. The appearance is derived from a single image, as I explained. We can clone your voice so that the avatar then sounds like you, even though you've only used text, for example, to determine what it might say. And then we do some analysis on the text to understand whether you were maybe a bit angry when you wrote that text, or you were a bit happy, so that the animation of when the avatar then speaks reflects that as well. So, just a description, avatar is a very high level sort of header. Yep. And then there was a lot of technologies underneath that really drive our avatars and are sort of testament to what makes them so different to what else is out there.
And I guess part of the realism is, as you said, it's the facial expressions, it's the voice, I guess the bodies as well. Historically, maybe that's a bit of technology that's been kind of lagging behind a bit, but certainly
they're full body avatars. We have legs, and of course, even though we don't track where users' legs are, we use machine learning and AI to sort of build a system that can do an approximation of that, which is very effective.
Brilliant. So kind of who are you working with at the moment? Kind of who's your ideal client? What does good look like for you guys at the moment?
Yeah. So we're working with several partners in the game space, and we're always looking for other opportunities in that particular VR. It is quite promising that there are more and newer headsets coming out. Meta have announced that their Quest 3 headset's coming out later this year. There's a few other entries still to come into the market. So we know there's a demand for games, and we've worked with Team 17. We might be doing more work with them in the future, and we've been talking to lots of other publishers about similar kind of projects. So I would say anybody in that space. Yep. And I mentioned sport, and I mentioned tourism. And I think the other thing to say there is training. So we've actually, on the training side of things, just briefly, we've been working with one of the leading universities in the UK on leveraging our technology to provide a setting for student nurses to effectively complete part of their training, but do it in a sort of virtualized environment, something that would traditionally involve physical people having to come and do role playing and sort of create a whole scenario. What we've done is a sort of create a prototype of a sort of virtual version of that training. And what we're quite excited about is we're going to be testing how much time that saves, and also how many more nurses ultimately we'll be able to train using a sort of virtual system for that. So I think those three areas are really, outside of the gaming space, sports, tourism, and training are the sort of three areas where we're most active in.
Awesome. So kind of, you've talked before about the big blue chips in the market, Meta, Qualcomm. You touched on Apple before. Apple have just announced, I think it might have even been this week, they announced their entry into the VR market. I guess that's good for the market. I guess that's positive, and I guess those entities are kind of all aware of what you're doing and kind of where your technology fits into their wider propositions.
Yeah, I think lots of great stuff still to come. I think Apple's press event is actually next week. Okay. 5th of June. Not much, lots of rumors and speculation. We have a very good relationship with them, so it'd be wrong for me to go into sort of specifics, but everybody's been sort of really waiting to see what Apple are up to. Yep. I think that's fair to say. And I think it's also fair to say that when you look back at what they've done, is they've always got the timing right, and they've always sort of taken their, picked their moment, as it were.
They've hit the wave of the trend a lot of the time.
Yeah, right. And in some ways, it's really sort of ignited it properly. Yep, so, very much looking forward to seeing what comes out of Cupertino next week. But Meta are continuing to invest heavily into hardware. Pico are now in the play in the market as well. Sony have just come out with PlayStation VR 2. So we think that whole space has still got a lot of growth ahead of it. And so we're very happy with the space that we're in.
And then in terms of, again, I guess a technology thing for a Luddite like myself, a few years ago, we saw things like Google Glasses come into the market, and then obviously the technology wasn't quite right. Is that something which you expect to see come back into the market and really affect the AR market, the augmented reality market? Is that something which the future will look like, or kind of what kind of does that world look like?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Google Glass in some way was a bit of a dead end, because really that was more like having a very tiny display. Yep. Just on the sort of periphery of your vision. Whereas what we're talking about with something like mixed reality or pass-through is a lot more sort of all-encompassing and a bit more akin to, I think, where we want to get to. I think one thing we're already seeing this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if Apple and Meta are going to be sort of the first to demonstrate that is that the form factor of these devices that you wear are getting better and better and more desirable by becoming sleeker. Yeah. I really, when you look at them, from the last couple of years, they're still quite bulky. Yeah. We're starting to get to the point where they look more like ski goggles in terms of the thickness. And I think the technical spec of these devices is also becoming higher. The costs are going up a bit as a result. But what's happening is that what we think is going to happen is that the ultimate end user experience will be that much better and will therefore be that much more convincing. Yep. And for people to kind of see this is really a sort of step change in using video calling or any of the sort of technologies or services that we're used to today. and just see how much better they can be.
Awesome. So kind of looking forward, as we have done in terms of for vTime itself, what are your next plans? What are you wanting to do over the next 12, 24, 36 months? And ultimately, when the time is right, what might an exit look like for vTime for our investors?
Yeah. I mean, we're continuing to obviously pursue commercial opportunities across the board, and particularly around the gaming side of things, as I said. But a lot of our sort of future-facing activities in terms of R&D are very much centered around AI, very much centered around machine learning. We think there are several of the projects that we're doing that have got the potential to really scale, and if that's the case, within the next 12 months, we're likely to continue down the fundraising road, but probably in the US. And in the meantime, I think from our point of view, we're obviously just kind of focusing on trying to hit the right notes along the way with regards to partnerships in the areas that I mentioned before. And
I'm assuming we won't go into names, but with some of those names that we've already mentioned in the podcast so far. So yeah, which is exciting times. So the question that we ask all of our guests usually is about the Deepbridge dinner party. Who would you invite to the Deepbridge dinner party and why? On our last podcast we did with you, you've already done that, so I'm not going to ask you the same question again. And for those who haven't listened to that podcast, they were Michael Schumacher, Midge, and Sid Meier, so three very interesting individuals. And you'd probably forgotten that those were the three, Clem, so that's I'll just remember that. So out of those individuals, my question for you then is, what personal quality does one of them have that you believe you personally have, or you hope you have?
Okay. So yeah, thanks for the reminder of who the still looks a good dinner party.
Absolutely,
I'm still happy. I'm still happy with that. I mean, they all have amazing qualities. But if you're really talking about a personal quality, a really simple one would be Mitch, and I share the same birthday.
I'm not sure that's a quality. I think that's a fact more than a quality. But no, very good. That's good. No, I think that would still be a good dinner party. Look, I think we've got we've been working with you for a number of years now. We've got a number of interested investors who are excited about what's going on at vTime, and I'm sure we'll probably catch up with you again in a few months' time and see how we're getting on. But really, I think first and foremost, thank you for your time today, Clem. Really good to catch up, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Great stuff. Thanks.
Speak
as always, Andrew.
Thank you for joining this latest Deepbridge Discovery podcast. If you have any topics you'd like covering in future podcasts, please email us at discovery@deepbridgecapital.com. This podcast was brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon.